Welcome to the Good Food CFO podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Delavan, and I'm joined once again by our producer, Chelsea Steer. How are you, Chelsea?
I'm good, Sarah. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Excited to dive into a brand new episode.
Yeah, before we start though, I just want to remind our listeners out there, if you're listening to us on your podcast app, like give us a follow. It really makes a difference. Same thing if you're watching us here on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. And then wherever you listen, please do rate and review the podcast because that is the number one way to help get the message out to more founders out there.
Thanks for that great reminder, Chelsea. I mean, we have such great people on the podcast, just like today, that we really want people to know about and get more people to hear the show. So today, I'm actually welcoming back Elizabeth Eichhorn to the podcast. You may remember that she is a seasoned entrepreneur and leadership expert who has coached over 1,000 entrepreneurs and counting on both strategy and business development. And we're also being joined by Maggie Gentry, who's the founder of Own Your Why. Maggie supports high conscious entrepreneurs who are looking to intentionally grow their business with more ease through her unique blend of insightful business coaching and mindful marketing consulting. Elizabeth and Maggie joined me to talk about their partnership and how their experiences as both entrepreneurs and coaches sparked the idea to create a different kind of business retreat, one that they call Slow Business Retreat.
Yeah, Sarah, this was such a good conversation that I can't wait for the audience to hear. I enjoyed how the three of you really were very open and a little vulnerable, right? And shared the experiences that you've all been through, right? And that I think that our listeners, the founders out there will really connect with
Yeah.
on how hard it can be to be running your own business and how you have to remember to take care of yourself. And we actually had two bonus clips that came out of this episode where you dive even deeper into some of the signs that, you saw in yourself and that they saw in themselves where you knew you had to like slow down and really reset. And then also how those experiences inspired all three of you to do business differently.
Yeah.
And both of those clips are available for our Plus members inside the Good Food CFO community. Now, before we jump into the meaty episode that we have ahead of us, I want to talk a little bit about a news article that I sent you that I know you read it, but I really want to hear your take on it. We haven't talked about it yet.
Yeah.
The article is titled "Sweet Green Wants to be the McDonald's of its generation. This rival salad chain could beat it."
Mm-hmm.
We had a question in the community that sparked a lot of conversation around margin.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that this story was really interesting in the way that it kind of gives us a different way to look at how business can be done.
Yeah, I think, I may have said it here on the podcast before, but I think there's a lot of benefit in looking at larger companies and companies that are, growing fast and might even be considered a unicorn like Sweet Green, or a low cost leader like it sounds like Salad and Go, is trying to be in their space. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. And it's not because we're looking to them to emulate everything that they're doing. Certainly not, right? We know that as of November 2023, Sweet Green still has $1 million of net losses, right, in their business. We don't necessarily want that for our listeners, but we can see and be inspired by creativity and how some of these businesses are building on their own terms and in their own ways. And I think that I at least could see that. And obviously you did too, to send me the article in what is doing. And so for those who may not be familiar, so something about Sweet Green to know as we head into this conversation here is that when they launched, they were very focused on regional food systems, right? So out here in LA, they were sourcing strawberries and chickens and, other produce from businesses, from farms, I should say, in our region. When they opened in the Atlanta area, there were some CPG founders located in Atlanta, that they were and surrounding regions, I should say, that they were sourcing like beverages and things from. So they really were trying to build regional food systems in a way, or support them through the development of Sweetgreen. It's an expensive thing to do. And over the years, they've had to evolve their model, and they continue to do that. With Salad and Go, one of the things that they talk about is, and I can't remember the specific name of it, Chelsea, maybe you have it there, but they do have like a commissary kitchen, right? Two of them, I believe, where all of their, you know, salads and you know, certain other products that they sell are prepared and then sent to the various locations. So that's very different in terms of the model. And then at each of their locations, and this shocked me, there are only 2 people working. Not just that, there's like no way in. Like there's no seating for customers inside. They are not taking orders at the counter. It is drive-through only, and you can place your order at the window, or you can place your order on the app and then pick it up in drive-through. And I want to kind of stop here because this is an example of how they're changing the model, or sort of the infrastructure of fast food, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, as someone who has worked in food service with a high volume drive through, just personally, like, what are you thinking when it's like 2 people, you know, managing this, and the drive through times are, they said in the article, like 4 minutes
Yeah.
on
So I
average.
don't know if you saw my eyes when you said the 2 people, and I was reminded of reading that in the article and the just fear that I felt because, and you know, in our situation now, granted, we were making everything on site,
Right.
right? We were preparing beverages and we had a very complex menu, but you know, basically anytime I had to work on the floor with 4 or less people, I was sweating the whole time.
And one of the
Um,
differences would be, though, that you've got in person, like people coming to the counter, you've got people at the drive through,
absolutely.
and you've got mobile order.
Absolutely. Now, when I think about this model and I think about most of the items being like pre-prepared, right? I believe there's like some level of customization,
Yeah.
right? That you're doing in-house, but you're not having to prepare those. It's more of just like scooping and mixing.
Assembling. Yeah.
And so I can see where that would work. Um yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of questions of how that works.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing to point out, is like, we don't know several things about Salad and Go, right? We don't know how the volume of the store, right? We don't know if it's like a Starbucks where you've got a line of people waiting at the drive-through, or if, you know,
Mhm.
it's a bit kind of less stressful than that. We also don't know what the wages are that they're paying their employees. We also don't know the sourcing of, you know, of the ingredients and what that looks like. And that's important for me to point out, because we are talking about them as an example of thinking about how you could do business differently than it's done, like currently, or in most instances, right? So that's something that we can look to and go, could I be inspired by how they're changing things? But also remember that we're not trying to emulate them necessarily, and we don't know everything like about the business. I just really want to be careful, you know, to say that. We also know about Salad and Go that they are looking at like really fast paced growth. They're opening, I think it's over, they right now have 130 locations, and they're opening more and more, you know, throughout the year. They do have investment funding to do this. Something that the CEO did say was that they are profitable in their established markets. And so what I think the big takeaway is, or at least what one of the big takeaways for me was, is that they want to not necessarily compete with Sweetgreen, as the title of the article would imply. What they actually are wanting to do is provide a healthy option that competes with fast food like McDonald's or Jack in
Yeah.
the Box, or maybe Whataburger, right? Like in Texas, and provide a healthier option, but at a price point that matches what you can get at one of those fast food stores. That's something else that I think is a really kind of like inspiring point is like, just because it's salad doesn't mean it's competing with salad. And they understood their position in the market, which is so
Yes.
key and something that we talk with founders about all of the time. Is it's hard to figure out your price point if you don't know who you are in the market. In this case, they're quality to a certain degree, but they also have a low priced product, right? And right now we're reading The Great Game of Business for our book club. And this is something that they talk about in there. You need to know where you are in the market, who you are in the market, so that you can price your product appropriately. And then you need to understand the business, right? Play the game in a sense to structure things, hit the cost that you need to be able to provide that product at that price point and be profitable, right? And have that positive cash flow. So yeah, I guess two lessons, so far from this article is, one is rethink, like, yeah, this is how other businesses are doing it, but how could we do it differently to meet our need? And have the who are we in the market and what price point do we need to be at drive many of those decisions. I'd say much like some of our clients and community members who on ingredients and packaging can't lower their price point, right?
Yeah.
That's going to determine the channels that they sell through, right? Kind of works both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also determines, or maybe not determines, but gives them an opportunity to look at all the other aspects of the business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the sales channel, but their labor, their efficiency, the workflows, the systems, right? All of those things are things that as a leader you have sort of, not, I don't want to say control over, but like you have your fingers in the pie, right?
Yeah.
And can have those levers to play with.
And I think Jason did a great job of talking through some of those things in his episode, right? He was really clear about how they're not relying on scale, right? And nor are they relying on reducing the quality and the cost of the ingredients that they're putting into their product, but they are looking at things like production efficiencies. They are looking at things like modifications to packaging that can lower, the cost of that part of the product.
And I would even point out something that I thought was really interesting that I don't think I caught the first time through. He specifically was talking about looking at the packaging options based on the sales channel.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's a great point to bring up, because if you're going into hospitality, let's say, meaning you've got your product in a high-end hotel, right? That packaging needs to have a certain look and a certain feel because it goes along with a certain price point. As you move through the channel, right, and I'm just going to say in a grocery store, let's say, you can have sort of a less fancy packaging. You can have it still look good. It can still look sleek. It can still be totally on brand, but it can be different and, lower the cost so that it makes sense for you to be in that channel. Now, am I recommending that you have different packaging for different channels? No, not necessarily. But as you move through and grow into additional channels, you can think about, things like that.
Yeah.
I think another thing that was really interesting about Salad and Go to me, and this is another sort of like strategy in the article, it says the unique thing about Salad and Go against any other quick service restaurant brand out there is that we enjoy a 2-day part single occasion. And I thought that was really interesting. And what that means, and the CEO says it here in the article, he says you can show up at 6:30 in the morning and get your breakfast burrito, get your coffee, and get your salad for lunch during the same occasion. And that's just another way of thinking about who are we in the market? Who can we be for our customer? And really knowing that, which is hard to know, right? You're like, I don't know who I am. I want to be this particular thing for them, but really knowing who are we to our customer? Who are we in the market? And how do we make the most of who we are is such a critical part of figuring out all of the financials, like from that point. And it's actually very helpful for you in figuring out what levers do I have to pull or what targets do I need to reach to make this business work. So really good article. I mean, I feel like we could talk about it for quite a long time. We're going to post the link or put the link in the show notes. Read it. Come and join us in the community if you have thoughts or questions, comments about it, or if if you've got something to add to the conversation. I think it's really interesting, and I'm so glad that you shared it with me, Chels.
Yeah, definitely. But now that we have everyone thinking about their market position and who their business is to their customers and clients, maybe it's time to slow it down a little bit and dive into a conversation about who their business is to them.
I think that's a great idea. Let's get to it.
Do you want more from the Good Food CFO? Join our newsletter. When you sign up for the Good Food CFO newsletter, you'll get updates from us about the podcast, what's happening in the Good Food CFO community, articles from the Good Food CFO herself, Sarah Delavan, and information about the free and low-cost resources that will support you in building a business on your own terms, all delivered straight to your inbox weekly. Just visit thegoodfoodcfo.com to sign up today. And now, back to the show.
Elizabeth and Maggie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I love when I have two guests at a time. Elizabeth, this is not your first time here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yeah. And Maggie, welcome as a first-time guest to the podcast. Super excited to meet you and learn about you today.
Truly a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned, Elizabeth, you've been here before, but I'd love to give our listeners just a little bit of a background on both of you. Maybe Elizabeth, we'll start with you, and then Maggie, you can tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
So I am or what we usually call a serial entrepreneur. So I have kind of run the gamut of business ownership. And so starting out in the food business, I had multiple food businesses. And then I went into coaching and helping other women-owned businesses actually raise money for their companies. I have now coached nearly 1,000 entrepreneurs across the world on their business within sales strategy and marketing and how to help really get funding for their business. So that is what I have been doing.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah. Maggie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I have a marketing background and I started my own business doing business coaching and marketing consulting almost 8 years ago. So I've been in the freelancer world for a while and navigating what it really means to honor who you are and the person behind the business and allowing that to shine through, and not only shine through, but also to impact the strategy of how you move forward and how you build the business that is in support of you as the person. So that's really at the heart of my work, which is kind of reclaiming and redefining marketing, which is kind of how Elizabeth and I clicked.
It's so amazing. And it resonates with me so much. And a lot of what we talk about here on the podcast and in the work that we do, we talk about building a business on your own terms and the difficult act of sort of letting go of what media celebrates as success and the goals that you should be achieving and the ways that you should be marketing and growing your business. We obviously talk about the financial aspects of it and how you might approach growth and what success is, right, for you. And it seems like what you're talking about is very much aligned with those thoughts and ideas. I'm super excited to dig in today. So how did the two of you meet? And I mean, I guess we should tell our listeners that you're both here today to talk about the philosophies that you each have as business owners and in support of other business owners, but you're also doing a slow business retreat. And we're going to dig into that, of course. But how did the two of you meet? And then how did the idea for the retreat come to be?
It's interesting because I think like many of the folks that I've met in this online space, when we try to trace it back to exactly where it was, it's hard to exactly recall. But through work, Elizabeth and I connected and then discovered, there was a clear connection just from through the pixels, and then discovered that we both live pretty close. I'm in Austin and Elizabeth is in San Antonio. And so I think maybe Elizabeth, I think you pitched it first of like, hey, let's meet up in person. And so we did. And then we started having these regular breakfast dates in San Marcos, which is the midway point. So shout out to Blue Dahlia in San Marcos. And we connected and we had conversations over breakfast and coffee. And through that process, really discovered that our philosophies were really aligned in how we saw business and how we hope to be of service and how we hope to make impact on the world. And really it's through this idea of doing things like you were mentioning in a countercultural way. Like how can we bring an anti-capitalist lens? How can we live into our feminine cycles and allow that to really guide how we operate in the world? So those were a few of the themes and the threads that allowed us to like really know that we were speaking to a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
We were chatting about this, and there was this moment where we realized we would start doing these like walks and talks and just these conversations, because I think when you start it, and Sarah, you and I've had a similar kind of thing as well, where when you find a person who resonates with your belief system, you just want to continue to have a like deeper understanding, and you feel like you're not alone. And I think that's exactly how it was with Maggie too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a grounding,
Yeah.
right? And so we're out living in the world that is fast paced and has a set of goals and a structure and all of these things that like we're living in it, and it can be very helpful. It is very helpful, I think, to ground yourself with people like yourself, Elizabeth, and you, Maggie, although we're meeting for the first time today, and I have a friend in Ashley Sutterfield. Gosh, we meet monthly and it like through Zoom for today we met this morning for like 2.5 hours. And there's just something about spending time together and almost not resetting, but remembering, and sort of recalibrating with one another. And I think the big question is like, how do we go from these moments of grounding to building a business, building a life where that's the norm? That is the status quo, if you will, of our day to day. And I think it's easy to talk about. And of course, there's been, on social media, it's like, you can work from the beach. You can be this, like, I don't want to do that. I like my house. I like to be stationary. I want to both be myself and fully know myself and live my life as like an individual. And I also want to have a meaningful business that serves me and other people. And it's going to look different for everyone. And how do we find that, right? That's the big question. And it seems like you guys are helping people to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you just talked about the social media piece. And I mean, this is truly where I heard Maggie give a presentation once and was just like blown away at the idea that, oh, right, we don't have to rely so heavily on this platform that big Silicon Valley tech bros have told us that we have to continue to abide by. And, going back to even my businesses, I remember having these like almost anxiety attacks of, if I do not post by a certain time, if I do not do something on certain windows, then I am then out. My business is no longer going to be relevant. And the fact that that's actually getting more and more true by other platforms continuing to say, oh, by the way, the video content, like long form video, is seriously 15 seconds long. Like, that's wild. We do not have a society that can actually hold its time and attention span for more than 50 seconds. And so we are only relevant in society for 15 seconds at a time, period.
And oh, by the way, and this is something we've talked about via our book club here, which we just launched last season, but consuming content like that is going to take us further and further and further away from who we are. So if we as individuals are putting out content like that, it's a cycle of just losing ourselves. right? Both as business owners, I think, because we're not creating content that we want to, we're not connecting with people the way that, and maybe as a business owner, you do like that. And that's okay, right? We're not saying that there is like one way to do it. But for those of us who don't, I remember, like, thank God the dancing thing is over. But like, like, I was not going to be promoting my financial consulting services by dancing on the internet. You know what I mean? But like, so for those of us who aren't into that and who don't want to show up online that way, it doesn't serve us as business owners, but it also doesn't serve us as humans in the world and trying to run businesses.
If we have this philosophy or if we believe certain things, how do we live that? Like, how do we create a plan that allows us to walk that talk? And so I think that social media is a great example because it's so funny how it seems like we equate marketing now with social media, and that we don't realize that before 15 years ago, 20 years ago, like there were other ways to get the word out and to market ourselves. And so that's why I'm always curious to speak with folks about what is the way, how do you want to show up that honors who you are and how you can be most authentically yourself. So if dancing videos on TikTok is not it, like it is not the end all be all. There are other ways for you to do that. And so, I mean, I haven't been on social media for my business in 3.5 years. 3 years.
I love that. And I think you bring up an interesting point too. You know, I'm a financial expert. I'm not a marketing expert, but I always think of the financial piece as sort of like the hub, for example, and then you've got the spokes, right? Because if you're going to spend money on marketing, I'm going to know about it, right, in a business. And a lot of people put a ton of weight on social media, even more so than sending an email to your mailing list or what any of the other options that might be out there. And again, I'm not an expert on that, but I always try to tell people, like, in my mind, that social media is like a difficult egg to crack or nut to crack because you have very little control. You have control over what you're putting out there. You have control over when you put it out there, but you have zero control over how many people are going to see it. And for example, if you've got folks on your mailing list, they've said to you via signing up, I want to hear from you. I'm open to receiving information from you. And so you can deliver that to their inbox. And then there's much more control there in the people that you want to speak to receiving your message, right? Number one. And then they have a choice of whether or not they want to engage with it immediately or in the future or not at all. And just using that as an example, it's like there are other ways, and those other ways may actually be more impactful than social media. So you do indeed have a choice, and you don't need to be on social to be relevant.
And I think that agency piece that you just spoke to, Sarah, is the key. So remembering that we do have choice. And so I think that in the moments, and I think this is perhaps coming back to the slow business retreat and also where Elizabeth and I really mesh, is because it's important to have that sacred pause so that you can get clarity on what your yes is. And then we figure out the plan. How do we then take that yes into business, into life, into action?
Okay, tell me more about the sacred pause.
That's like lovingly what I'm calling what we're doing at the slow business retreat. Yeah. So I'll speak for myself, and then I know Elizabeth has her own take on this too. But for me, the sacred pause is really that moment to allow ourselves to unabashedly, selfishly, wholly inhibit our experience, our world, our body, and get back into a space where we can get clarity from whatever source that might show up. So we all are intuitive in our own. And so I think that it's really important to carve out that dedicated time to fully be with yourself. And that's what we hope to create with this retreat.
You know, there have been so many times when I'm growing a business that when stress is coming inside of my body, truly my body is starting to hurt and ache and get to a place where I end up having to go to physical therapist or all these things that I end up going to because I'm not listening to my body. I am somebody who has had to face a lot of death in my life. And I have had to unfortunately look at my life and say, I have this one body. Like that is what death has reminded me. And why would I put all of my time and energy into a business and not be able to actually enjoy the body that I have? And then it's no longer like what is life after that? So there are a few things within business that are often taught. One is this, you have the a hockey stick model, whereas this very you start off and then you very much like quickly grow at an exponential rate. And I really believed that in my first company. And I saw good traction, but I started looking at how that traction was a facade. I wasn't actually like, I didn't have revenue necessarily. That's not true. I had revenue. I didn't have profitability in my business. And I didn't have friends after a while. I didn't have like my marriage was starting to like unravel because I was spending so much time and energy in all these other spaces. And as I have coached so many incredible businesses and business owners, I continue to hear the same thing that I went through. And I just kind of got to a place that said, there has to be another way. We have to stop saying this is the only way to do business. And this is the only way to do business to find profitability. Because I don't want to die because I have a business. That sounds terrible. And I also don't want to die because then I'm working for a corporation. Like we gotta shift this and make this like, different. And so that's where this idea really kind of started, was this practice first and foremost of, I would go out and walk every single day out in nature and starting to see this, okay, I'm starting to calm myself down and making this kind of pattern for myself just so I can have that groundedness that we mentioned. And then it just continues to expand from there. How does my practice then led to me being a better coach, for me being a better wife, of me being a better friend. I was like, well, what's happening here? Why am I being better here? Why is my anxiety starting to decrease? What's going on? And so I thought about that a lot and really putting boundaries around my time and saying, my health, my life, the practices that I need for me need to come first.
Yeah. I cannot tell you the number of times in like the last 6 months that I've been on a one-on-one call with someone and said, you're going to kill yourself, and meant it as a sort of a last resort of, I can see that you're wearing your body out, that your stress levels are so high. And there was one conversation where I was like, you're going to get into a car accident, or you're going to cut yourself with a knife in the kitchen, or you're going to hurt somebody else. Like, this is very serious. You are running constantly, literally not getting enough sleep, giving more of yourself than you have to give. And I've shared on the podcast, the physical things that went on with my body when I was running my first food business. And it very much, mirrors what you just shared, Elizabeth. And it's like, it is so common. I think what the three of us are trying to do, and the two of you specifically with the retreat, is to help people break that cycle. And, through the act of a sacred pause, right? That over a sort of I'll call it an extended period of time, because it's not just one walk in nature a day, right? You're kind of going, let's do a big pause here and kind of step out of what we're doing. I also had a conversation recently that, I didn't fear for the person's health necessarily and life, because they were recognizing the fact that they have hit burnout and they want to make changes, but so there is an awareness there, right? But they're still in the day to day and doing all of the things. And in my point of view, there's no space mentally to have any new ideas for how do we approach this. And so I think when we're in situations like that, having something like a retreat, to step away and to sort of have new ideas and fresh ideas into kind of, I've been saying a lot lately, like tear it all down, just mentally tear it all down. And then if you could rebuild it, what would it look like? So I think that as many ways as we can find to help people through this process and to break the cycle, the better. Because not everyone is going to resonate with, the way that you guys are doing it. Not everyone's going to resonate with the way that I do it. And so we need all of the different, different ways. How did the idea for the retreat come about? I know you guys had spent some time together and you knew you were speaking the same language, and it seems like, Elizabeth, you were recognizing the pause in your life and how it was affecting you. Is that part of what led to?
It was part of it. I had heard Maggie give a presentation specifically about solo retreats. And my background, even before entrepreneurship, was in the retreat space and retreat world. And so when I had heard this from Maggie, that was one of the first kind of, partly conversations, but it wasn't, we had not come up with the idea at all. It was really just like getting to know each other, having these conversations. And what we remembered was, truly, I think what happened was over time, we were having these like conversations and these walks and talks and just kind of exploring. And I think it just really kind of came from there of, okay, we're doing this, we're having these conversations, we're both in a retreat. We like retreats and we want to help on other people. So why not do this? It just so happens that I have access to a retreat center because my mother runs a retreat center in Texas. So it all just kind of made sense that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to say that it was even one of those kismet moments where it's like, I think, Elizabeth, you might have even pitched it like, what if we, one of those like visioning, like dreamy statements of like, what if we did a retreat? And I was like, oh, yes. Like it was just one of those full body yeses that you get when you just have a knowing of like, this is yes.
So it's coming up in the not too distant future. So can you share with our audience when the retreat is happening, and then a little bit about, the structure or lack of structure that might be, part of it that people will experience if they attend?
Our registration is actually closed for our March 2024 dates, but we have September already on the calendar. So amazing. September 25th through 29th. And there is a loose structure. Of course, we want to encourage everyone to check in with themselves at every point around what feels best for them in that moment. But the idea is that we have 3 full days together. So each morning will be spent with either myself, Elizabeth, or Mary, Elizabeth's mom, in a full group workshop setting. And then from there, there's more of a choose your own adventure that you get to alternate between a small group session with one of us, free time to work on whatever, or take a nap or go on a hike, whatever you like. And then one-on-one coaching sessions, which are optional between. So we're excited to see how it evolves.
We do believe that this is an opportunity for those to come together who are like-minded individuals. We are not specifically saying just for women, but we are saying, women and allies in this space. We are creating a space for people who are wanting to do things differently for themselves and be able to lean on each other and lean on Maggie and me in these spaces so that they can continue to really grow what it is that they're doing.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to what some of the things they can expect? I mean, you mentioned the spiritual piece, which I think is amazing, the group coaching, the one-on-one coaching. Can you speak to what someone might bring sort of mentally, you know what I mean, to the retreat and the kinds of coaching that are provided?
What to bring could either be 2 things, not that these are exclusive, but it can either be that rock in your shoe. So the thing that perhaps isn't causing major distress, because otherwise you would have addressed it yet, but what is the thing that is causing enough discomfort that the retreat can be stepping off the path, taking off the shoe, taking the rock out, and putting your shoe back on to continue on your walk? And so sometimes that's just having a question that needs some clarity. Or it could be thinking about what is that project, idea, yearning that you've just left on the back burner. So I think of these back burner projects and how could you give this idea, creative project, give it time, like allow it to come to the front burner for these few days and give it the attention that you've so been craving. I think that really that's how we're seeing this space and time being best utilized. But obviously, anything under the sun could also be helpful. Sometimes it's just needing a reset as the founder of your business and having space where you are offline, and that's perfectly acceptable too.
I want to ask, we've been talking about burnout and sort of the very dramatic place that people can find themselves in, that founders can find themselves in, and sort of the pause and the value of something like your slow business retreat can bring. But I think that there isn't, like, that's not the only occurrence or situation that someone could find themselves in where something like the sacred pause or full-on retreat can be helpful. Can we talk a little bit about like what else it might feel like or look like when that might make some listeners go, oh, that's what I'm feeling here. And I could use a little pause or a reset or a grounding in my business.
I pause. Funny enough, I pause to answer that fully because I think what it looks like for everybody is a little different. But I will tell you, for me, man, Sarah, I don't know if I shared this with you, so get ready.
Okay.
This summer, I was at such a peak of stress that I kid you not, I was just randomly throwing up in places. And like was coming out of nowhere. It wasn't like, oh, here's something coming up and when you're sick. No, it was like my body was crashing and I was having to figure out how to make that make sense. And the only way to really make that make sense for me was to say, I got to step out of this thing and I have to slow down.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's pretty extreme.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody's different. I hope that's not everyone else's case.
Yeah. Goodness.
I think for me, I'm always trying to seek like what feels like a sigh of relief. Like, what can I do in any given moment if I'm feeling little burnout creeping in? Because I have been at that point, not quite I didn't have the same manifestation as Elizabeth, but I've been in that burnout space. And it's like, as much as possible, how can I avoid it? And so I feel like I'm always tinkering with different levers to see what might feel good. So for the past couple years, I do summer Fridays. I don't work on Fridays in the summer. I have specific days that I have calls on my calendar so that I can have, my introverted heads down, get shit done days. Yes. I love that Elizabeth and I do walk and talks. And so just being in her orbit reminds me that, oh yeah, I have choice. I don't have to do video calls always. There are some of these that I could ask to go outside and move my body. So I think it's because, yes, like not always is it possible to take 5 days out of life to do a retreat. So I think it's how do we find the mini moments? I was feeling really tapped yesterday, and so I took a nap. Like, not everyone loves a nap. I do. So it's just like, how do we honor our needs in those bite-sized moments? And my hope is that if I do that daily or regularly as best I can, it helps stave off the like big bad burnout.
Yeah. I think something that I'll add in answer to my own question, just thinking back again to some founders that have been in our coaching program, we went through an exercise that ask the question, what do you no longer want to do?
Mm.
Because there were some folks who had successful businesses in that they're generating revenue, they're profitable, but in these instances, the founders weren't able to make certain decisions in terms of moving forward. They felt kind of stuck. Either that or each week when I saw them, there'd be like one idea this week and then change of plans. We're going to do something else the next week and then it'd be something else the next week. And so I think when you're feeling like you're trying hard to make a decision and you can't, or you can't settle on something because you don't feel confident in choosing, that can be a sign. And something I think that can be helpful is like, is there anything that you don't like to do in your business, like something that just literally makes you unhappy? And one of the founders was like, I don't like going to the farmer's market every weekend because I don't have time with my husband who works Monday through Friday. And it feels like, because we've been told I should not do this because I want to have fun with my husband. I need to do this because this is where we make money. And this is something I've done from the beginning. And so I must continue to do it, because if I stop doing something, it's a failure. And the reality is it's not. It's a failure, I think, if you don't choose what you want and what will actually make you happy. And sometimes you can't answer what do you want, but you can answer what do you not want.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I just kind of share some of those, like I've sort of observed people in difficult spaces where it doesn't quite look like burnout, but they're kind of stuck. And the reason is they need to make some change, but they have to get quiet and take a pause to figure out and answer the question, what do I want or what do I not want?
Yeah, I think it's really incredible when people can say and define, I don't like doing this in my business. And it's even more incredible when they look at the fact that they don't like doing a particular thing and they actually have enough money coming in so that they can actually hire out. That's when I in my coaching moments, that's when I think it's like, those moments of like, what do they say? Like the gates of heaven, like open, and you're like, oh my gosh, you've got it. This is what it means.
Yeah.
And that revelation, I really believe that it does not matter if you have this idea and you recognize that. I guess what I'm trying to get to is you should never have to go into business alone. And there are people who want to come in, support, and help you. And I think that's the thing that with this retreat in particularly is for us to say, there are other ways to look at your business. And there are people who want to help and encourage you to help you get to the next space within this business without you hurting yourself, hurting those around you, and, having to sacrifice everything about who you are and your belief system to get to profitability.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah. Tell our listeners, Elizabeth, where the retreat is happening.
So the retreat is happening in at Casa de Milagros, which is in Rainbow, Texas. It is southwest of Fort Worth, about 45 minutes. You can fly into DFW and be able to get to the retreat center in about an hour.
Amazing. And is it at your mom's retreat center?
It's at her retreat center.
Amazing.
That would be her retreat center. Yeah.
I love that.
That's it. So she has a huge labyrinth that she's going to be walking people through and talking about the importance of the labyrinth and how do you, utilize that in your own space now.
Very cool. And I know that there's a website where people can go and read and get details about the September date and kind of, additional details about the retreat. What is that web address?
It's slowbusinessretreat.com. Made it super easy.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you both for being here. Such a lovely conversation, lovely energy, and, something to think about. I think that no human, especially as a founder, gets through their experience without feeling something that we've talked about today. And I think it's really wonderful that you all are creating a space for the grounding, for the reset, to take the rock out of your shoe. I think it's really amazing. And I hope to attend one in the future. So I'll be visiting the website as well.
We would love that.
We'd love to have you.
Well, thank you both so much. Have an amazing day.
Thank you.
For more content like this and connection with other food founders and industry experts, join us inside the Good Food CFO community. Just visit thegoodfoodcfo.com/join to learn more.
Thank you for joining us here today. If you enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It's the #1 way to help good food founders find the show. We'll be back with a brand new episode next week.